As history becomes a political battlefield, the NCERT has denied media reports that entire chapters on the Mughal Empire have been erased. But there is a concession that the syllabus has been, quote unquote, rationalized, and that the intent of this was to reduce the burden on students. But the political debate carries on. Is there an attempt to erase, to undermine the place that the Mughal history should have in our textbooks, as is being alleged by the opposition? Media reports also suggest that it isn't just history, but also political science that has faced a purge, a reference apparently to the ban on the RSS as well as to Mahatma Gandhi's work for Hindu-Muslim amity has also been removed slash rationalized according to multiple reports that are coming in as what our students are reading in schools becomes a major political controversy. Let's introduce our guest today. History has always been at the heart of politics and it continues to be thus. Why is the BJP in some ways, because this controversy started in UP, taking such a strident position on Mughal history in particular? Let's introduce our guests on the program today. Joining us first up is General Zamiruddin Shah. He's, of course, a military veteran, but he's also been the Vice Chancellor of the Aligarh Muslim University. A pleasure to have you with us. Also joining us is Professor Mridula Mukherjee, one of the country's best-known historians. Also joining us is another very well-known and respected historian, Professor Ruchika Sharma. It's a pleasure to have you with us, ma'am. Shantanu Gupta is joining us. He's an author and political analyst, including a biographer of books on Yogi Adityanath, the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh. And also joining us is PKD Nambiar, who's a political analyst and commentator. It's great to see all of you. Let me actually start with you, General Zamiruddin Shah. I ask you this because you have worn two hats. You've, of course, been a fierce patriot as a veteran of the Indian Army, but you've also been a vice chancellor and therefore an educationist. You were also among Muslim leaders of your community who went and met with the RSS chief. When you look at this controversy, how do you look at it?
Well, yesterday we had Professor Saklani on the NDTV program explaining why this was done. He said it was a process of rationalization of the syllabi. I think it's the most irrational statement to make. What does rationalization mean? Well, I don't think it means anything other than obliterating a portion of history, creating a gap. The second reason which he gave is that we do not want to put excessive load on students because of COVID. I would like to remind him that COVID now it's on this last throes. There may be a few cases, and we should revert back to what we had earlier. I would say that history is history, and any gaps which you create in history, the students will not be able to understand the succeeding paragraphs. If you have a gap, you cannot proceed with the succeeding whatever chapters. Now let me tell you a few things about the Mughal rule. The Mughal rule was not a Muslim rule by any means. 40% of the generals, the administrators, were either Rajputs or Kais or other castes. The Mughals, I would say, assimilated the fragmented states which were all over India. They had been assimilated earlier, but now India had got fragmented, and they did that. They built roads, they built infrastructure, and they did not rob and plunder and move away back to their homeland. They made India their home. This is one of the things which people who want to obliterate Mughal history need to remember.
So, General
Yes,
Shah, when you hear the NCERT officials use the word rationalization of syllabus, you've already said it is entirely irrational. Why do you think this is being done? Because they're arguing all we've done is reduce chapters. There's still a chapter in the textbook on Mughal history. All we've done is shortened it. What would you say to this?
no. They've said we shortened it. We've also included other subjects. I think this is just a fig leaf of cover to obliterate a portion of our history. Now, let me give you the example of Europe. the in the medieval times, there was a period called the Dark Ages, where Europe was constantly at war. There was disease, there were all sorts of problems which Europe had. It was the Dark Ages. But did Europe historians obliterate the Dark Period? No, the Dark Ages. In the same way, if somebody thinks that the Mughal period was the Dark Ages, and I am certain it was not, there is no need to obliterate it. We need to learn from what the period taught us.
Yes. Let me open up what you've said. You've said two, three very important things. You have said that this is a fig leaf, that it's been called a rationalization, but there's nothing quite so irrational. And you believe that this smacks of bias, as it were. Would you use the word bias, General Shah, before I go to Shantanu Gupta? Would you
No,
use the
no,
word
no,
bias?
that's a little too strong a word. See,
Okay.
I don't want to get into any controversy. I
What's the
said
word
it's
you
a,
would use? What's the
I
word
would
you
say
would
it's
use?
just somebody who feels that the Mughal period was a period of plunder and torture and demolition of temples and such things, which it was not. Yes, there were instances of people uh, desecrating, destroying some temples, but this was also the case of several Hindu princes who, when they captured a territory, they made sure that the Raja of that territory, whichever deity he was had temples with, they destroyed those. So it is
Right.
not only the Mughals who did it, it was any conqueror who did this. But in the Mughal period, there were cases, but I think they were not of the magnitude which are being projected.
Okay, let me now bring in Shantanu Gupta for his comments. Again, we are being very careful in the words we're using, Shantanu. So we are not saying erasure, we're saying rationalization. General Shah says it's irrational. He won't go so far as to say bias, but he's saying this is irrational. There's a fig leaf. There was no need to do this. In fact, you can portray kings, conquerors in their shades of black, white, and everything that lies in between. For instance, many of us who studied history in school, we were taught to appreciate Akbar and criticize Aurangzeb. So it wasn't that Mughal history was taught to you in one monochromatic way. Shantanu, please do go ahead. And you're just unmute yourself, Shantanu. You're on mute at your end. Shantanu?
I think, Barkha, in the start of your program, you already tried to break this rumor or a lie that's been getting spread that Mughal history is removed. And as I think Lieutenant General quoted, NCERT's director Dinesh Prasad already clarified that they have rationalized, right? And I use the word rationalized in a very rationalized format. So what they did, if one chapter or one topic is repeating multiple times in class 8, class 9, class 10, then one appropriate moment, either in class 8 or class 10, they've removed it or reduced it. That's the only exercise so that they can rationalize. This activity is done multiple times in NCERT, multiple times every decade they do it. There's an expert committee, advisory board who does it. It's not that Mr. Saklani is cutting and noting the books alone. So there's a whole expert committee and there are minutes of meeting. All is documented why there's some things removed. There are many other topics which are got removed. Let's say I'm reading the newspaper, the emergency topic is also rationalized. That way, if you see that for the current dispensation, knowing more about the emergency is good for the current dispensation, because there was a black chapter on the other dispensation on the Congress side, right? So a
Hmm.
lot of such things are removed, in which Mughal history is also removed in some part, as we are hearing. We don't, no one has seen the textbooks. We are hitting the dark. I am saying this debate is far more pertinent when we all have the books. We have the previous book of the new book. Currently, we are all hitting the dark. Now coming to Lieutenant General's couple of examples, he said, and he was rightly alluding to dark ages. Even I agree. However dark the age was, it should be read. We should learn from the history. We should know how jizya tax was put on Hindus by Mughal kings, even by Akbar. It was not removed even by Akbar. How how iconoclast was done by Mughal kings and the kings, Muslim kings before that. In fact, if you give me the address of General Sir, I'll send him the 2 volumes of Hindu temples, what happened to them. They're thick, fat volumes and very detailed, document by document, quoting Arabic text, quoting the courtroom documents of the Mughal kings. It's mentioned that how more than
Hmm.
20-30,000 temples are being destroyed. So let's not trivialize. that, oh, it was a small incident here and there. Islamic philosophy was major part of the rule. They did not just come here to rule. So yeah, even I agree. Mughal history should be taught. Every dark age should be taught, so that we should
Hmm.
learn from history.
But wouldn't you concede, and I'll let maybe a historian react to this, Shantanu, that there are kinds and kinds of conquerors, right? There are benevolent kings and there are draconian kings. This is the same with politicians today, but in the age before democracy, there were kinds and kinds of kings, and their governance, their administration did not have to do with their religion. It had to do with their personality, their philosophy, their way of thinking, which is why Akbar was not the same as Aurangzeb, was not the same as Shah Jahan.
No, I'm saying I mentioned, I think you missed that point, that even in Akbar's time, Shahjahan's time, jizya tax, which is a very draconian tax, that being a Hindu, you have to pay tax, that was not removed in any of the Mughal kings. For some reason, now I travel far and wide, some reason I never read in detail in my books about the Chola Empire, about the Vijayanagar Empire, about the Home Empire, right? I never read them about, maybe not even a line. Shivaji was at least 3 lines. But these kings are
Hmm.
never even a line. When I watch movies now, when I talk to a lot of new age historians now, I read about them, right? So this was, I think, to a normal mind, you can identify that how Mughal history was glorified, and even Akbar was made great Akbar just to establish, and we never talked about his jizya tax and the iconoclast. That's why I've shown you again the amazing text, a lot of historians which not
Okay.
published with the famous publishers again at that time, and now these books are available,
Okay.
anybody can read them and do the research.
Okay, two very differing views in the opening. So let's open this up now. Professor Mridula Mukherjee, I beg your pardon. Do go ahead. Firstly, this is a revision. There have been three revisions since 2014. Textbooks have been hotly politically debated even in the age of the Congress. We've long had Marxist historians go head to head with right-wing historians. So I think the hope that history is some empirical sort of science has long been abandoned. It's always been a very politicized conversation in our country. How do you look at this particular moment when we're talking about these references having been rationalized?
Firstly, let me say I disagree with you. I don't think that we historians have abandoned the effort to write a history based on facts. Interpretation is there, and there will be differences and must be differences in interpretation. Otherwise, it is just a compendium of facts. And history is not a compendium, a list of facts, but it is based on facts which have to be authenticated. There is a scientific core to the discipline where each statement you make has to be footnoted. All
Hmm.
research works have not just one source, but often each footnote may contain five, six different sources to authenticate. And often the serious arguments among historians are over sources. How do you interpret a source? The authenticity of a source. Like archaeology brought in a whole new dimension to the study of history because it gave a kind of material basis to the study of history. So from time to time, new sources are brought in. Oral history nowadays is very big. Gender history is big. Dalit history is big. So it goes on changing, and the interpretations also go on developing as we
Okay.
go on. I think you perhaps did study history in college.
No,
And
I studied literature. I studied literature.
literature.
I studied history till class 12.
Okay.
But to the present controversy, what would you
Yes.
say?
I would say that as far as this is concerned, firstly, I agree with the general that what's being done is a rationalization or a justification of what is called a rationalization process. And there is no rationality to the way the so-called rationalization has been done. Let me give you one example. Shantanu said we are all talking in the dark. Unfortunately, being a historian, before I open my mouth, I check facts. It's just a habit. So I did go to the website of the NCERT. I've done it thrice since yesterday. When the controversy started, I checked for myself whether those passages were deleted, which chapters were deleted. And I'm pretty familiar with the earlier books as well. So
Hmm.
I can say that I'm speaking on the basis of what I have seen with my own eyes. The chapter, for example, which has been deleted from the class 11 and 12 course textbook, which is our past number 2, which is on the Mughal Kings and Chronicles. Now, it seemed to be a very odd chapter to suddenly drop out because the chapter that follows is on the Mughal agrarian system. It talks about the whole land system, zamindars, peasants, agricultural production, trade. And before that, there is nothing on the Mughals. A student who's studying a chapter in detail on the agrarian system of the Mughals has no idea of the overall structure of the Mughal
So what's
Empire.
so the
I mean, just a
yeah,
moment. Barkha,
yeah.
let me just finish. Give me 1 minute. So, let me just tell you, when you are rationalizing, you're dropping, let's assume for a moment, let's grant them that this exercise is born out of COVID and the desire to ease the burden of students, which we all know it is not, but for a moment, let us concede it. If I was looking at the class 12, 11 and 12 syllabus, then there is a whole book on ancient India, a whole book on medieval India, a whole book on modern India. How is it that the only chapter that strikes me as worthy of being dropped en masse is one chapter on Mughal Kings and Chronicles? The argument is it is repeated. In class 7, they have studied that. In class 6, they studied ancient history. In class 8, they studied modern history.
Okay.
Repetitions will be there everywhere.
So you
So
believe
this,
it's deliberate. You
of
believe
course,
you believe it's deliberate. Let me bring in PKD and Ruchika now, since they've been waiting. PKD, Nambia, do go ahead.
I'm sorry, I can't be so innocent as to believe, after the history of the last 20 years of trying to change textbooks in India, that this is not
Okay.
motivated by something
Let
else.
me
I'm sorry, I cannot be
we-
that innocent.
let me get the others in. Mr. Nambia, do go ahead.
There are two aspects to look at this. One is from the point of an academic point of view. Since yesterday, I was also following this news quite a lot. Happened to speak to two vice chancellors since this morning about this. The only problem is that it is not, as the Lieutenant General said, the history needs to be told as it is. But is this history is being told so far or studied in those schools by you and me? Is it as it is? What was the kind of image which we have got? The Chola dynasty, which was much bigger, which has got a bigger contribution. We talk about Taj Mahal and every day in day out. Why we don't talk about Mathura Meenakshi temple, which is maybe a bigger marvelous structure, or maybe having an architecturally big. We don't talk about the Pandya dynasty. We don't talk about the Gupta dynasty. They all fall in a small paragraph in textbook. I am not against learning about the Mughal dynasty. I challenge the Lieutenant General and all the historians in this panel. Go to Connaught Place today. Talk to all those kids who are coming out of those schools. Ask that who is Maharana Pratap and how many wives he had, what was the duration of his dynasty, and etc. I can tell you that 99% of the kids will not be able to tell you the
But
real
you can
number.
but you can add
Whereas
without removing. You can add layers without removing.
I think that was explained very well by Dinesh ji yesterday. That he said that we wanted to contain the volume of the text anymore. In the times to come. So, but before that, I wanted to tell you that you go and ask the questions about, even in my office where I'm sitting right now, there are 75 people. If I ask that what is the series of the people, the rulers of the Mughal dynasty, वो आंख बंद करके वो ऐसे बता देंगे बाबर आया, फिर उसके बाद हुमायूं, अकबर, जहांगीर, शाहजहां, औरंगजेब, so on so forth. So let us not be so blind that we have been taught the history in as it is. Definitely no. Definitely no. And anybody whomsoever has got a basic common sense, with look at in a rational way thinking,
Okay.
human being will
So
understand
let
that
me
history
let
has been taught to us in a left or a
or a,
motivated approach so far. Now,
okay. Can I bring in Professor Ruchika Sharma now, and then we'll go.
okay.
Sorry, you want to complete a point? Add a
Yeah, I
sentence,
wanted to.
please?
I wanted to. I think the problem is that whenever anything related to a Mughal history, why do we become so touchy? And I don't have any hesitation to say, no matter whatever the Lieutenant General say, that they have come here. Even Shashi Tharoor on a debate was talking about they came here, they assimilated within this thing. They were invaders, they were terrorists. They just came to loot, and they
What
found
is
this place to
so
be a
so how
better place. They lived on.
So
So let
how
us
far
not
back?
glorify.
So
Let
how
us
far
not.
back in history are you going to? How are you going to go? Because there is
Can
also
I?
a school of
Can I?
history.
I
Can I
want.
just respond? Can I just respond? There is also a school of history that says that there is an entire sort of North India that pushed those who live in the South today, the Dravidians, down south. So at one point, there could have been some of us also whose ancestors were conquerors. So how far back are we going to go, PKD? How far
No,
back are we going to go to
I
say
wanted to,
someone is
because
not
I'll
Indian?
tell you, I belong to a dynasty, or I belong to a royal family wherein we were ruling till, and my great ancestor was the Parashiraj, the first Hindu king. He was killed by the Britishers. We don't listen about that much in the history books, and I don't know, maybe the historian will be able to tell that the first Hindu king who fought against the Britishers not only fought through a guerrilla war in the Wayanad, where the Rahul Gandhi is now, Wayanad in the Kannur district. We don't
Yeah.
learn about him much. Not
I
only that, even with the lieutenant general was talking about the assimilation. Britishers came here for not 40 percentage, 80 percentage of the entire British administrations were Indians, irrespective of the religion. So does that mean that Britishers now have not ruled us? Britishers have ruled us.
Okay.
Even if it is a 10 percentage of, even in the, look at in the history of the, whether it is in the French or
Okay,
in the Russian Revolution.
can I get responses? You made a lot of different points. Let me bring in Ruchika. Sorry, Ruchika, go ahead.
Not at all. Barkha, can I just respond to a couple of things? The historian in me would not let me rest, since a
Yes.
lot of things have been said. We do not use the term Dark Ages anymore. Nor do we use terms like Golden Age, because that is considered to be very ahistorical. So, irrespective of whether we personally, as a historian or otherwise as a layman, consider an age dark or not, we're supposed to study it. Having said that, the other thing, of course, is yes, jizya was repealed by Akbar, and it stayed like that under Jahangir as well, and was reimposed by Shah Jahan and Aurangzeb for reasons that, of course, all students must learn, and which is why we must have a chapter in the 12th class history on, the Mughals. The third point, about the whole cholas and the jizya tax being the only one which is religious. Cholas and the Vijayanagars also used to have a temple tax called Jodi and Sulavari. So it's not like religion and taxation has always been something that the Mughals brought in or the Turks brought in. It has been there in the history of the subcontinent forever. Coming to the textbook itself and the purge, there are two different purges. One is, of course, in class 7th textbooks as well. And if you see the purge that is happening there and the class 12 textbooks, you'll see that there is certainly a narrative that is being pushed forward. And the narrative is that these people are quote unquote invaders. So either their history is irrelevant or it needs to be presented in such a manner. So, for example, in class 7th history, they have introduced Mahmud Ghazni not as a sultan, and then they go on to say that he came and raided Somnath temple 17 times. I would really like to ask the NCERT what is their source for this, because so far I haven't come across a source that says that there are 17 times a raid has happened on the Somnath temple. So not only is there a purge happening, there is an introduction of what is now called as alt facts as well, which make absolutely no sense. And we would really like to see what is the NCERT's rationale for that. The 12th class history book is actually one of the most important ones, considering students choose to study, most of us actually choose to study in 11th and 12th humanities, right? So that means we are intending to make a career out of it. If you're going to leave out the Mughals, and mind you, the Mughals, as Jadunath Sarkar had once called them, the Kagzi Raj, have the most amount of documentation, which is why they have such a huge impact on Indian history, because they have documented even the smallest thing. So you cannot compare them with the Chola, you cannot compare them with the Vijayanagar, because the documentation is much, much more. There are so many avenues.
But how do you respond to the charge that has been made both by Mr. Nambiar and Shantanu here that there's been a kind of romanticization of the Mughals in the way that they have been taught?
I wouldn't say that there has been a romanticization at all. Um, if you look at the academic history, we have, as historians as well, spoken about many other areas which are non-Mughal or areas which are not so North-centric. So we do realize that there is a tilt, but that does not mean that we remove the Mughal history altogether. There is absolutely no romanticization. I would say that ever since the Mughals have been introduced, starting with the British, in fact, there is a demonization that has always happened with the Mughal history, considering we have an Aurangzeb who's considered, demo par excellence when it comes to the Mughals. So there has never been a romanticization at all. This is an absolutely a historical thing to say that there has been a romanticization of Mughal history. And this is why it's very relevant to study Mughal history, because it's so documented, it's so close to our times, it
I,
has such
I
a
want to go to
relevance.
I want to
What
go to
we wear,
Shantanu.
what
I
we
don't
eat.
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but just if you can conclude this part of your response by just one more question for you. What bothers you the most about the present controversy? The NCERT says, Ruchika, we haven't removed, we haven't purged, we have rationalized. You would say what?
I would say that even if it's a rationalization, it's a biased one. I would certainly use the term bias. I'm not shying away from it,
Okay.
because there is a narrative to be pushed over here. A narrative which says that these are our preferred history and this is our preferred historical narrative. Therefore, this particular narrative needs to go away or needs to be purged. There is a clear choice that the NCERT has made when they are trying to remove, and like I said, even
Okay.
class 7th history, so much of Sultanate history has also been removed. So there is clearly a tilt that the history that does not align with the kind of politics that we're seeing today has to go. I would say
So,
that
so,
is perhaps the
so,
rationalization behind it.
so let me bring in Shantanu now, and then I'll come to General Shah. Shantanu, that political tilt impacts how you look at the past. That is what is happening here, according to Ruchika and Mridula. General Shah is somewhat more circumspect, but still doesn't find what's happened rational. Shantanu.
I think Ruchika ji is, I think, contradicting herself multiple times what he said, and when he listens to what she said, I think she will agree with me. She said Mughals are demonized more than romanticized, right? In NCERT books or wherever it's available, right? So if they're already demonized, then removing them, why it's a bias, right? So if they're already demonized, BJP or some such dissemination will want to continue, right? A demonized Mughal is good for them in their textbook. And Ruchika ji is one side saying they're demonized, more demonized than romanticized, and then saying it's a bias to remove them. And I was saying, first you should settle what you want to say. That's one. Second thing, you alluded to Aryan Dravidian theory and Aryan invasion theory, Barkha, you yourself. I think now the historians who coined these fake theories, they also stopped saying things. So you also get your facts corrected. Now the historians in India who started Aryan invasion theory, by all proofs, they are all settled, and even the historians don't talk about it now.
Okay, I'm only asking you, Shantanu, briefly. I'll allow Rujika to briefly respond to you. But my question is, how far back in history do you go? You know, the Prime Minister of India, whosoever she or he may be, addresses this country from the ramparts of the Red Fort, right? If we were to look at the Mughals, all of them en masse, as these invaders who were never to be sort of accepted and assimilated, why is the Red Fort the chosen venue? Would we now start saying, let's find a symbol that has nothing to do with Mughal history? How far do we take this? That was my question, really, Shantanu.
See, there is no point to going how far, and this should not be a decision point that because the speech is given from the Red Fort, then you should not talk against or for it. That's not even a point, right? And now a lot of new constructions are happening in India. New parliament is getting built. New North Block, South Block is getting built. Maybe tomorrow a new symbol from where Prime Minister or President will address, that will also getting built. So, and that's not even a point, that because the speech is going from Red Fort, you can't talk against Red Fort. That's not even a
No,
point, right?
no,
So,
okay,
so
okay. Let me, yeah.
but my point is, see, the one argument is that Muslims came and they became us, right? That's a typical Shashi Tharoorian argument, if I say so. But if a today's Muslim take a pride in Aurangzeb, what Aurangzeb did, if today's Muslim finds his heroes in Babas and Aurangzeb, then I will have a
Which
problem.
Where is
I
this
will have a
Muslim who
problem.
is okay? I want to get General Shah to respond to that, and then I'll come to Ruchika. General Shah, I ask you this in particular, not because you're Muslim or that you wear your patriotism on your sleeve as a military veteran. I ask you this is someone who recently met with the RSS chief, and I think the questions being raised here become very important in that context. Go ahead, General Shah.
Well, I don't hero worship only the Mughals. I hero worship a whole lot of. I hero worship Shivaji. I hero worship Rana Pratap. These are all great military leaders, and it is not by religion. It is how they acted, what battles they won or lost. We must remember that the easiest way to learn anything is to learn from the mistakes of others and to learn from the mistakes of history. And if we obliterate a portion of our history, you would be depriving yourself of lessons which history should teach. I feel that this order, uh, obliterating a section of Mughal history, is short-sighted and the order should be rescinded.
And when you hear the suggestion that from Mr. Nambiar that these were invaders, these were conquerors, I mean, as an army general, does that hurt?
No, it means a lot because who's an invader? An invader is somebody who comes, loots, and goes away. Like the Brits. Have you called the British looters? Have you called them invaders? Let me tell you that the GDP of India in the 1700 was 22.4 of the world production. What is the GDP now? Please tell me. The
But that's
British looted
also,
us.
yeah, the British, of course, looted us. Of course.
The British looted us. Okay, it's not the Mughals who looted us. They stayed here. The British looted us and then they were thrown out and left. They should have remained behind. That is what I would have like to say.
Okay, lots of responses, I'm sure, to everything that's been said. Ruchika, PKD, and Mridula in that order, because that's how your hands went up. Ruchika, go ahead. Yes.
So to just respond quickly to what Shantanu said, when I said demonization, I meant popularly. And sadly, the way history is in our country, it's the popular perception of history which is weighed a lot more and weighs more on the average Indian mind than what is actually written in the textbooks. So yes, Mughals are absolutely demonized in popular history. There's no denying that. Coming to the other point, which is raised about the Aryan invasion theory. Invasion theory and migration theory are two different theories. The Aryan migration theory, in fact, has recently been proven without a doubt by two genetic studies, one in Cell and one in Science, two very good journals, and these are papers which have been written in collaboration with archaeologists here as well. So the Aryan migration theory is now proven beyond a doubt. So I don't think that's the doubt.
Okay.
The third, on the invasion bit, and in general, the idea of invaders, I think we're superimposing the present onto the past because today's boundaries of India were never there at that point of time. And all of history of India has been a history of migration, starting with the Aryans and then, the Kushans and the Huns. And, where are you going to stop and what are you going to draw the line, right? Who
Yeah.
are you going to call an invader and who are you going to call a benevolent invader, or who are you going to call people who were indigenously from here? What does that even mean? In a history of 2,000, 3,000 years, where people were constantly crisscrossing borders, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is a very nationalist perspective to take. When the nation was formed, then we started looking at borders like this, and has no currency in history before the nation came into being.
So PKD Nambiar, do pick that up, because that has been your sort of primary theory in this argument.
As I said initially, history needs to be told in whether it is dark, good, bad. Every kind of history needs to be told. The only thing is that the measurement of that is it the Mughal dynasty or these Mughal empire had been given more importance in our history textbooks. There is no doubt. Maybe from fourth class onwards, I am a father of two school going kids, and one just graduated from those schools. So I know that I've been going through these textbooks knowingly or unknowingly. I had to. And I know the fact that my daughter, who is studying in a school in Mayo College in Ajmer, now graduated to 10th. Few days ago, she was just telling me that why is it not Parashi Raja is not being taught to us? Whereas she had been to my ancestral houses and etc. And we have a big history to talk about it. But hardly we know. If I ask somebody, even in Delhi, even in maybe the two historians and one general sitting here, they may not know too much about Parshi Raja. So I think India is a very large, diversified country with a history of more than maybe 5,000 or a 6,000 or a 10,000 years. I think every time, whatever at least we know, needs to be told in the same equal importance. Unfortunately, in the last several decades, what we have been given a feeling that India is more of like invented by Mughals. India is India's modern construction or modern thing. What we are enjoying today is all given by the Britishers, as if before the Mughals, India was not there, or as if the Britishers were not here, then India would not have. We would have been all the snake charmers even today. I think the bottom line is that, in fact, yesterday Mr. Dinesh, the NCERT director, even said one more thing. Forget about the word rationalization. He said that it is not the public discourse. It is not the public which will decide what needs to be taught to the kids. There is an expert committee who scientifically study, prepare, and discuss,
Okay.
debate, and finalize the content according to the time.
Okay.
And that is, I think we should leave that to
Let
how
let
the textbook should be left to the people who are experts, not just to the
okay.
historians.
I
Historians
I
wanted to
I I,
teach
I
only
would
this history, but the
I would
scientists
just
wanted to teach only science. I
I
think
would
it
just
mathematician wanted only to look at from the prism of maths. I think
I would just make the point, PKD, that what is taught to children in schools is something that everyone has skin in the game. It is not something just happening, which is some expert domain. I understand respecting experts. Let me take your point to Mridula. One thing we haven't spoken about, though we touched upon it briefly, that the media reports do suggest that there's a line and a reference to Mahatma Gandhi that has also been excised, and this was the front page of the Indian Express today. Gandhi's pursuit of Hindu-Muslim unity provoked Hindu extremists. RSS was banned for some time. This line, according to the Indian Express and other reports, is among those that has been rationalized, purged, call it what you will. Mridula, do go ahead.
Well, I think that's self evident, right? When you read out that line. And in fact, in the para just above that, which you showed on your screen, there are
Yeah,
another
we can
five
bring
or
it
six,
up again. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead. Yeah.
there are another 5 or 6 lines which have been also deleted before that, which in fact talk about how they were that Gandhiji was trying for Hindu-Muslim unity, and extremists on both sides were not happy, and so there's a lot more detail about preceding his assassination, which actually talks about the atmosphere and how the assassination occurred. So there's an attempt to downplay, to remove the details which are not palatable. There's clearly an attempt to remove the name of the RSS twice, which was mentioned, including the ban on the RSS. I mean, I think it's so clear, the bias. And by the way, since I'm a historian, I don't forget easily. I remember what happened 20 years ago under the NDA. Same thing in the Modern India book. The sentence that Gandhiji was assassinated was removed. So students would be left wondering what happened to Gandhiji. He never died. He's still Amar. It was
Hmm.
such irrational deletions have been made. Now, let me just take up that point about expert committees.
Yes.
Are all these people who have written these books, and let me emphasize again if I haven't, there's a board of 10 to 15 scholars in each subject which have overseen the writing of these books, which were written about 10 to 15 years ago. Political science, sociology, history, each one of them. First, secondly, not no one person has written the whole book. Different chapters have been written by different people. Thirdly, I'm a little worried that these deletions are being made. Has any consent been taken by those expert authors who spent probably 6 months to 1 year writing very
Okay.
carefully those chapters for children?
Yeah.
There are so many issues over here. And lastly, what Ritika Chopra today has said on the front page, I don't know if you read it carefully enough. This particular deletion of Mahatma Gandhi's assassination, the sentence is, this has not been listed in the list that was given by the NCERT last year. They have not claimed this deletion. She has discovered this. My worry is there may be many more such deletions which we don't even know. They
Right.
need investigation. We need to do a line by line check to even know what has been deleted.
Okay.
We
I have
don't
to take
know about this.
I
It's not
fair,
there in
fair,
that
fair,
list.
fair. Yes, that's a very important point, which is why we have ascribed it to the Indian Express, because the NCRT has not commented on this particular deletion. Sorry, Mridula. What is Mridula saying? Can we? Sorry, ma'am.
I have checked it online in what is on the NCRT website, and these sentences are deleted.
No,
So
I
I
know.
can
I
confirm
I
that.
was just making the point that the NCRT did not talk about
No,
this particular
no,
deletion so far.
that's right.
I need to start taking last comments. Shantanu, I'll start with you. The reference to Gandhi, and of course the larger debate. Is this how we should be handling even sort of contemporary, modern history? like Gandhi, the RSS. The RSS was banned briefly. We know that. Why wouldn't people want to? Why wouldn't we want? Even if you were an RSS supporter, you would want your child in the classroom to know that the RSS was banned in this context. Then you can debate: was the ban right, not right? What was the relationship? I mean, this was. We're a country where Shama Prasad Mukherjee was briefly part of Nehru's cabinet. Have we forgotten that legacy?
See, I again persist to my point that we are hitting the dark, and Mridula ji I think slightly agreed that we don't even know what are changes are being made. She's
No, she
only
said she
referring to.
checked this
No,
change.
no,
She checked this particular change. Yeah.
don't object, no, don't look obviously biased, no, Barkha. That I keep suggesting you always. Right?
On Gandhi, I think we can all agree. On Mahatma
Let
Gandhi, I
me
think we
let
can
me
all
let
agree.
me let me
There's
let
no
me if you
right
call
left on
if
that.
you call a guest, allow them to speak, right?
Sure, please, please,
Yeah,
please, please,
thank you.
please.
Yeah, so let me make the argument again because you make it very non-coherent. So I think I'll again say the same thing again, that we are hitting in the dark. Mridulaji alluded that she also doesn't know what all changes are being made. NCERT has declared some, she checked some of them. So let's first get this sorted, right? Like I think you alluded to Shama Prasad Mukherjee. Someone say why that is not added. I will say why the whole murder mystery of Shama Prasad Mukherjee not added. I will say why the whole murder mystery of Dindayal Upadhyay not added, right? So I think that the debate is endless. We should go what expert committee has documented. I'll just go back to my demonization point, which again very cleverly Ruchika ji has alluded that that's the popular history. And she's saying in popular history, Mughals are demonized by making Mughal Azam, by making Jodha Akbar. Yeah, they're demonized, right? And show me a movie on Shivaji, show me a movie on Vijayanagar Empire, show me a movie on Rana Pratap, and they'll be hit blockbusters, right? So I don't know what we're trying to prove. I think we all understood, the viewers are understood. We all have a certain point of view, and by logical arguments, people are trying to, so-called historians are trying to prove that.
Okay. I think I want to pick up what Shantanu has just said, though he's accusing me of bias, but I'm actually picking up that last point because I think it's a fair point that in cultural imagination, Ruchika, the point he's made is that in popular and cultural imagination, until recently, we've just had a movie come out on the Cholas, until recently, your big epic movies, your big epic theater, your big epic sort of cultural references were all, he argues, about centered around the Mughals. Romance, kings, epics. We haven't, he says, seen that apply to other dynasties that were also important sort of epochs in the history of India.
Actually, this is happening right now. There are movies on Prithviraj Chauhan. There is a movie on Tanaji. So I wouldn't say that this is just something which is only restricted to Mughals. In fact, popular culture is a very good metric for this, Barkha, and also shows how the narrative is actually constantly shifting, starting from a Mughal-e-Azam, where Akbar was depicted the way he was, and which was a decent enough depiction of somebody who's, a person and also a king, to moving towards Prithviraj Chauhan, where the movie constantly talks about a Hindu-Muslim divide, which at that point of time possibly is even unthinkable of and is very ahistorical, right? So I would
Hmm.
think that the way the movie was made, the Mughal-e-Azam, and the way the Prithviraj Chauhan movie is made is actually quite different, and that in itself should tell you how much the narrative is polarized over the years. If anything, it actually
Okay.
goes to prove my point that the demonization of the Mughals and of by that the extension of the the Muslim rulers, so to speak, has only increased with time, and that is also now being reflected in the NCERT textbooks.
Okay. Shantanu, briefly, I'll just allow you to rebut that, and then PKD and General Shah can have the last words. Shantanu? We
I
just
think
lost
she
General Shah,
agreed.
but Shantanu, yeah,
I think
Shantanu.
she agreed herself that before 2014, it was largely movies around Aurangzebs and Jodha Akbars, and now finally Tanajis and other movies are getting made. So thank you, Ruchika, for agreeing.
Okay,
There
General
is
Shah,
no
last
movie on
thoughts.
Aurangzeb. There is no movie on Aurangzeb. I have never
Okay,
seen one.
well, if you're missing that, I'm sure someone will make that soon.
Okay, General Shah, last thoughts. General Shah?
Great influence on interpersonal relationship. In the 60s and 70s, there were a lot of Muslim socials and movies on Mughals and such things, and they led to a lot of unanimity. I mean, closeness between various people. They were not divisive. I have a sister-in-law who's an Egyptian, and she saw the movies of recent times, and she asked me a very relevant question: why are the crooks, the smugglers, the terrorists all wearing beards and called Abdul and Kareem and such things?
But sir,
And
there's also Pathan. There's also Pathan, which has been a super hit. There's also
no,
Pathan.
that is a super hit because people wanted it to face the way some other movies had gone, but
Hmm.
it backfired, and people wanted to see a good movie. And it's about a nationalist Muslim who doesn't declare what he is and doesn't wear it on his sleeve. At the moment, I'm afraid there's a large number of Hindi movies which are coming up, which are extremely divisive, and they are creating enmity between sections of people. We are one nation, as I said in the India Today conclave. We have five fingers of the hand: the Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, and Parsis. Five fingers of the hand, and if an attempt is made to injure one finger, the hand cannot be clenched into a fist. I would say that the present attempt to alter history is being assumed by Muslims as an attack on them. They are very, very apprehensive of what, and as somebody said, let us wait till everything is done. You mean to say we do not give our views and await something which is already done and the fait accompli is there? Then you can't
Yeah.
change anything. So, this is the reason why I'm voicing my opinions on the subject.
Thank you for that, sir. PKD Nambia, last word to you.
Well, there
I
are
think
two things. There are two elements. One is that what the General Saab said, that one is altering the history or correcting the history. I think let the experts decide on that with regard to the textbooks, whether it is are they altering it or are they correcting it. The number two part is that the other historian said is about the modern history. Let's talk about the modern history only. Only just two instances I will speak. One is the Popular Rebellion or the Malabar Rebellion, whatever you call it. Like it is in 1921. Tell me how many Hindus, including the pregnant woman to the kids, were butchered and they have been treated as the freedom fighters. Now, if that is the history I wanted to learn, I would rather say, tell my daughter that, tear that textbook and say namaste to the education. If even today you go and see Barkha, and I really want you to go because there is one journalist, if it is in this country, who can really go and emotionally explain the real story, it may be you. When thousands of people have been killed, butchered, nobody talks about it. My own temples, I'm talking about, it is said that this, even the archaeological team, my own family temple, which is even maybe 5,000 years old, it has been told that it is built by Lord Parashuram. Thousands of temples have been demolished by the Tipu Sultan. If he is a hero for someone, I am sorry, for me, he is a terrorist. And if that is the history I need to be told, I need to be learning. And I invite all of you, even today. In fact, I have funded some amount of money just a couple of years ago to
okay.
rebuild one of the temple in my village, Barkha. And why worried is that, but when I learned history in the schools, Tipu Sultan was the hero for me because that is the way I have been taught initially. The same
Okay.
is in the case of Popular Rebellion. Just imagine, just 30 seconds. The Popular Rebellion, the full text. I mean, I don't know which class I studied that it was a full one chapter about the Popular Rebellion and the Ali Musliar to all those kind of people, including a Khilafat movement and etc. It is being told that they are the national heroes, and it took only a Narendra Modi to come and remove their name from the freedom fighters list. So I think we all need to look at objectively. This is
Okay.
not a history of 5,000 years old. This is not a history. This is a history just only they celebrated 100 years of 1921. You know what was the entire
Okay.
the parade was all about? They were holding, even it's in the modern Kerala I am talking about, in Calicut. They were saying that Hindu ko maar denge. So I
Okay.
think we need to look at holistically rather than just having a blind, half blind, that is, oh, everything Mughals were
Okay.
created in this world is
I,
good.
I, I was going
I'm
to, I was
sorry,
going
I'm
to
sorry,
close.
becoming a little emotional because I saw that,
Okay.
I have seen it, and I can take all of you. I invite you at my cost
Uh,
to tell you how many temples. how many
Okay.
temples, and as old as you can't even show me one temple in the
Can-
north of India of that magnitude and size, like the great Rajarajeshwara temple in Taliparamba in Kannur district. It's just next to
All
5
all are
kilometers
broken
from my
in north
house.
of India.
Come and
PKD.
see it. Come
Okay.
and see it and say
Let-
that is it
very-
Tipu Sultan did it? If a terrorist who is breaking or demolishing a temple of mine which has got a history of 5,000 years, is he a hero? And
Okay,
if
let
you
me
want me and my kids
P-
needs to learn that he's a hero,
Mr.
I am
PKD,
sorry.
PKD.
I am
Okay.
sorry. That is not the history. It is
Okay,
a stories which
okay.
has been created by a
Okay.
section of some people just to create heroes, villains to hero.
Okay, I did have to close, but I'll allow Ruchika a very brief response, and we have to close after that. And I think there's a larger question I have just to pin on to what Mr. Nambiar has said. When we read history, whose history are we reading? Are we reading the subaltern history? Are we reading history from the perspective of the kings and the rulers? Are we reading it from the point of view of Dalits? Are we reading it from the point of view of women? The storyteller and the lens that the storyteller brings to the same sort of set of developments could make what we read entirely different, which is why history, not just in India, but even in the United States of America today, where statues are being brought down, for example, remains such a live wire subject. Ruchika, very briefly, please. Yes, Ruchika.
Right. Just couple of things before I answer your question very briefly. The whole temple demolition debate, I would think it's an interesting one, and I would really want students to actually know about it. Because you see, the temple demolition debate so far has only been very skewedly been looked at through the lens of religion. When we have examples of, for example, Jain shrines being converted into Veerashaiva shrines, you have the Meguti temple in Hallur, you have temples in Adichanallur who have been changed like this. There is a Jain temple called, which is now called the Undeshwar Mahadev temple, which has been converted into a Shiva temple. There is a Buddha stupa, which was in Maharashtra, which has been converted into two shrines. In fact, one is a Shiva shrine, and just next to it is the shrine of Vithoba. So there are many such examples, and architectural reuse, as it is called in academic circle, is a beautiful subject, and I would really want students to actually learn about it. I have nothing against introducing a chapter to it, provided that we actually provide all the different facets of how temples were demolished, and not just through the perspective of religion, which is the only perspective that we look at, which is a very minor perspective of the whole temple demolition debate. Coming to your question, it's a very pertinent question actually, Barkha. As a woman also, I feel I am so underrepresented in most of my history. Where is my history? However, I would actually point out that I think when we try and design textbook for students, what we try and include is portions of history which we consider are quote unquote relevant, in the sense that it'll help them give a gist of the entirety of the subcontinent's history, right? So
Right.
in that perspective, removing Mughals and removing the Sultanate is a big deal, because that does form a huge chunk of the subcontinent's history.
Okay,
No
we
matter
have
what your
ended.
opinion on that is.
We have ended where we started. I think at this point, with completely out of time, apologies to those who still had points to add. We will have to just let our panelists agree to disagree. The debate will carry on, and we hope to be able to have constructive and civil and honest conversations about it. Thank you so much, Shantanu Gupta, PKD Nambiar, General Shah, to Professor Mridula, and to Professor Ruchika. Thank you so much, and to our audience. See you tomorrow. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.